Well, leaders have been reaching out to Donald Trump to congratulate him on his U.S. election victory. Among them, the Secretary General of NATO, Mark Rutte.
Look forward to work with him again. When he was president, he was the one in NATO who stimulated us to move over the 2%. And now, also thanks to him, NATO, if you take out the numbers of the US for a moment, is above the 2%. And I think very much that is his doing, his success, and we need to do more. We know this.
During his first term in office, Donald Trump repeatedly threatened to pull the United States out of NATO. He cited members for falling short of their commitment to spend 2% of their national GDP on defense. Canada is among the countries still short of that mark. Mark Rutte was commenting there on his way into a summit of European leaders in Budapest. Trump and the future of U.S.-Europe relations are a hot topic, as you can imagine, not least because of the ongoing war in Ukraine. Joining us now with more on the summit is CBC's Abby Kuwatasan in Berlin. Abby, what is the summit talking about?
Natasha, you know, the leaders at this summit really facing a reality that they had hoped to avoid. The goal of this summit that was previously scheduled was really to tackle the challenges facing the bloc. And of course, now a new challenge emerging yesterday with the U.S. election result. And that challenge is Donald Trump. And most European leaders see him as an obstacle, as a challenge, because of some of the statements that he has made, not only while he was in the White House, but throughout his election campaign as first. And much of that has to do with his America First outlook. Now, there are two major concerns when we're talking about what's going on here on the continent right now. The first is that they're worried about a possible trade war with the new U.S. administration once Trump enters the White House after inauguration in January. Trump has already pledged to impose a 10% tariff on all imports. That includes imports from the EU, Canada, as well. Of course, European Union leaders very concerned about that. Here in Germany, the car industry very much concerned about that. The second major concern is, of course, about support for Ukraine. Washington provides easily the bulk of the military aid that Ukraine requires to fend off Russian aggression. We did see President Zelensky, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, in Budapest today, meeting with some of these EU officials. He's been trying to garner support for Kyiv for over 2 years now, and he's trying to do that again today. Here's a little bit of what he had to say at the summit.
Yesterday, I spoke with President Trump, as many of you did, and it was productive conversation, good conversation. Of course, we cannot yet know what his actions will be, but we do hope that America will become stronger. And this is the kind of America that Europe needs. And a strong Europe is what America needs.
Now, some of that concern, of course, has to do with Trump's comments that he may pull back Washington's support for Kyiv. He's also pledged to end the war within 24 hours of entering the White House. The Kremlin has brushed off that boast. We are keeping an eye on Vladimir Putin. He's speaking right now. If he makes any reference to Ukraine or the incoming U.S. president, we'll certainly bring that to you. Now, I must say that not all EU leaders are nervous about a Trump presidency. The host of this summit, Viktor Orban, Hungary's Viktor Orban, thrilled about a Trump presidency. He said this is great for the entire world. He does not want to help Ukraine further. So certainly some EU officials happy about a Trump presidency. But again, when we're talking about European unity and pushing for more support for Ukraine, protecting their economies, there's a lot to be done still.
So as the European leaders are trying to figure out what their next steps are going to be with President-elect Donald Trump, Germany's got a whole other issue that they're dealing with. Let's talk about what's happening with the German government right now.
Natasha, never say that German politics is boring, right? In the last 12 hours, the coalition government here has collapsed, and we saw German Chancellor Olaf Scholz like we've never seen him before. He gave a very late night address to the nation last night, absolutely seething. He tore apart his finance minister, saying that he had an incomprehensible ego, that he was untrustworthy, and said that he had to fire him. That leader is Christian Lindner. Lindner is part of the FDP party that helped helps uphold Scholz, keeps Scholz in power. But Scholz is insisting that he can stay on in power as chancellor until January. He says he'll work with other parties to get legislation through. But the opposition this morning came out putting some cold water on those plans, saying, well, you don't have any support. You need to call a confidence vote and then call a snap election as soon as possible. We have a lot of domestic issues to tackle. We have international issues to tackle. So we're keeping an eye on this. Right now, the coalition government dead in the water, but Scholz hanging on. That might not last because the opposition, again, calling for a vote of confidence next week. And if that happens, we could see an election as early as January, Natasha.
All right. I know you'll be watching CBC's Abby Kuatasan in Berlin. Thank you.